Hey, we're back on the Ask Dr. Be Good show. We haven't had one for a couple of weeks, so it's good to get back in the saddle again. We hope you enjoyed your winter break and that you actually, parents, followed through on some of the suggestions that were made in the How to Keep Your Child's Brain Working During the Winter Break podcast. We have, as always, I believe, a very relevant and interesting podcast having to do with our special population kids. And then before we get into that topic, let's go around the room and see who's here.
My name is Mary Kahama. I'm the Federal and State Programs Officer. And as well as I'm over special education.
My name is Cynthia Mann, and I am the special education coordinator for the district.
My name is Lolita Johnson, and I'm the dyslexia therapist on the Plano campus.
Welcome, and thank you for being here. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day, because we do have a couple of special ed students, don't we, Dr. Kahama?
Yes, we do.
Can you talk a little bit about our special ed environment in really in the legacy world?
Yes, I think before I start talking about how many students we serve in a legacy PCA school district, I want to talk about a few misconceptions we have out there as far as public charter schools are concerned. One of the biggest misconceptions we have is that public charter schools do not enroll students that qualify for special education services. Now, granted, Dr. Good, public charter schools are granted some autonomy over some of the issues. Like, for example, we are granted autonomy over our curriculum, our educational approach, our educational philosophy, as compared to the traditional school district. However, we must by all means comply with the federal laws when it comes to enrolling students who qualify for services under special education. It is actually against the law to discriminate against a student based on their disability. So that being the case, public charter school must enroll all students. The other big misconception we have out there is that public charter schools do not provide the same level of support when it comes to services that we provide to special education students as traditional school district. However, it is very important for us to know that students with special education services and their parents have legal rights to equal access to a free and appropriate education program, which means that when a student transfers to our school district, we must look at their individualized education plan and provide those services that the student needs in order to qualify. Now, that being said, in our school, we have about 128 students who qualify for special education services, and that is about 10% of our school's total enrollment. And Dr. Mann will be talking about the categories of the disability that we serve and how many students that qualify for services under each and every category. So having about 128, and then something I want us to note down is that we have seen a gradual increase in the number of students that are enrolled in our campuses and qualify for special education services. About 3 years ago, if we look at how many number of students we had in 2015, 2016, we had about 76 students who qualify for special education services. The following year, the numbers went up from 76 to 28. Last school year, we had about 106 students who qualify for special education services. As we sit today, this school year, we have a total of 128 students who qualify for special education services. So we have seen a gradual increase of the students who qualify or who are actually enrolling in our school and qualify for special education services, which to me is a good indicator that charter school appeal to a lot of parents who have students who qualify for special education services.
And why do you think that is?
One of the things, Dr. Good, I think, is that we are a smaller community and we are able to address the needs of the student. As a matter of fact, we did have a student who transferred to our school district, coming from a very affluent school district, and the parent transferred because we're not very happy with their services. Now, when they transferred to our school district, we are able to develop an individualized education plan for this particular student, and he was able to perform and succeed in our setting, being even a project-based learning school, and was able to graduate actually last year, and right now is in a community college. So we are providing the needs and addressing the needs of the student based on the fact that we are a small community. Our students are very receptive to our students, and our teachers, we provide them with training on an ongoing basis on how to address the needs of these particular students.
I think I'm safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in Plano where our SPED numbers are a little bit higher, that our success with students of autism have caused other families with autistic kids to consider us as one of their choices.
Correct.
And the particular young man that you're talking about who came from the affluent district, I believe he was in the most restrictive environment there, and then he came over to us because his father thought that his son probably could do it better.
Right.
And then he went into a least restrictive environment
Exactly.
with us and was successful.
He was, yes.
A lot of it had to do with how tolerant our kids were around him, and they worked really well with him, to the point where he even was prom king last year at the prom.
Yes.
So it's nice to see our kids bending over backwards and making somebody so comfortable they're able to graduate and also be prom king.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that our parents are able to feel comfortable in our school setting.
All right. Well, thank you. That makes me curious as to what are the different services, Dr. Mann?
Well, currently, to meet the needs of our 128 students that are presently enrolled, we have different services. We have, beginning with the least restrictive environment, we have the inclusion services. And in that environment, our students are able to maintain and be in their general education classrooms and receive accommodations or some supplementary aids to help them be successful and have equal access to the curriculum in the classroom. Then we have our resource setting where we have some students that maybe have a little bit more of a cognitive delay, where they require some direct instruction provided directly by our special education teachers in a more smaller setting, and so that we can provide services for them in that area to provide where they may need some accommodations to the curriculum. And then we also have a service that we provide for any of our students that are age 14 and older, where we have the transition services, where we sit down with each student and we look at where their plans are, to include the parents as well, what their plans are and what their expectations and hopes for their students after high school. It's so important that we prepare our students to be productive members of society and to be able to earn gainful employment as well and be as an independent. And so at Legacy, I think the smaller setting, we're very adamant, and this year we're getting each year we get a little better and better at the service that we provide with transition and with the outside agencies that we're able to bring in. For example, Texas Workforce Solution comes in and provides services. If we have a student that has a need, they'll come in, they do an assessment, and they're able to provide the family with additional resources, as well as provide family parents with training to open up resources to parents and students outside of the school environment, in the community environment, so that they can be successful and succeed there. We also, on a need basis, and this year, that since I've been here and last year, we have not had a student, but we do offer homebound services. It's a case by case. If it's a medical need of a student, that's a service that we provide. And that's kind of like a misconception, what Dr. Kahama was alluding to. Sometimes people think that charter schools do not provide the services and accommodations that students are in need of, but we do very much so. Also, we have, of course, we have speech services that we provide to our students who need those services, and we have dyslexia services that we provide, and Ms. Evans Johnson will talk about those services in a minute. But in addition, we have what we call related services, and these are services that kind of fall under the umbrella, but we don't have the faculty on staff that have the ability to provide those services. We contract and partner with Region 10, and those services will be like our occupational therapy services, our physical therapy services, any assistive technology services, any students that may require vision and mobility services, orientation services. So Region 10 comes in and partners and provide those services. And then we also have psychological services with the way the increasing, society and things are happening out there in the world. Some of our kids are affected, and we have those services on a need basis as far as the psychological services, do assessments and provide that counseling as needed as well. And then just one of the other services that I wanted to talk about as far as us providing and making sure our kids are successful, we make sure that the accommodations, that the supplementing services and the modifications are there based on the individual need. And I think Legacy does an excellent job talking about the smaller environment, what Dr. Kahama was talking about. We do an excellent job of looking at that individual student. Each student, although they may have be qualified as a student with specific learning disability, each student with that area of disability are very different, are very unique, and even with that same title, there are different services that they require. And I think that Legacy, we do an excellent job of getting to know the parent, getting to know the student, and making that individualized in the IEP the focus, and going above and beyond providing that service. So just an additional breakdown, we have between all three campuses, we have 22 students who qualify for services under what we call other health impairment. And this is services that it could be a medical condition, it could be a severe case of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but for whatever need, for whatever the case, there's a need where they qualify for those specialized instruction under that other health impairment. We also have one student. We had two last year, but we have one student now who qualifies for service under our auditory impairment. And with that in mind, we contract with a certified teacher who comes on campus and provide those services and work with our that student's teachers to make sure that in the classroom they're implementing the accommodations, and if need be, they're using the devices that will help the student with the hearing in the classroom. We currently have 4 students that qualify for intellectual disability, students with ID, and those are the students that more than likely are receiving services in our resource classroom, where they get that direct instruction from a certified special education teacher in that smaller setting. We have currently 5 students who qualify for services with emotional disturbance, and that's just a success in itself, because when you tend to think of a student with emotional disturbance, it's the myriad, it runs the gamut. And our students are successful in the environment on all campuses. Their needs are met. We make sure that with our special education staff, we do a post check. We check in, and we try to train our teachers to spot early triggers. And so they're being very successful. We have our largest population that we serve is specific learning disabilities, and we currently have about 53 students who qualify for services in that area. And that can range from the areas of reading, it can be from math, so that's all encompasses. And those students are mostly served in our inclusion environment. So what that means is that they're in the gen ed classroom, and they receive assistance from our special education paraprofessionals, our special education math tutors, and coaches that will go in the classroom and assist alongside the teachers and make sure they're getting those accommodations. And we do have speech impairment. We do have 32 students who receive services with our speech language pathologist. This is a person that we bring in from the outside that provides those services. And also lastly, which is a growing number, and I think it might be growing across across the nation, we have 11 students that qualify for services as students with autism. And that is just growing. Research is continuing to grow, and that's a large gamut. And when it comes to a student with autism, we really hone in, and the students you were referencing earlier, that individualize. We have to get to know the student. We got to figure out what the triggers are. We got to figure out train the parents, and it's really an ongoing. And I think what Legacy does so well is that we're flexible. What worked today may not work tomorrow, and our teachers are receptive to saying, okay, we tried this, so let's try something new. So those are the breakdown of the students that we currently serve. And overall, on our Mesquite Elementary campus, we have about 49 students. Our Plano campus, which is K through 12, we kind of don't break it down as far as elementary, K through 12. We currently have 44 students. And our Mesquite Secondary campus, the 6 through 12, we have about 36 students in that population.
Just, can a child ever exit out of special ed?
Yes, ma'am. And that happens, and we've had quite a few students, and what it boils down to is if there is no longer an educational need. Just because a student has or may have a disability does not mean they automatically qualify for special education services. That's one of the misconceptions. It has to be an educational need in order for them to qualify for services under special education. So all the time we have students that come in, they may have transferred in, or they may have started with us, and we've equipped them with enough supplementary aids, or we've equipped them with enough accommodations where they have become owners of their own learning, and they're able to implement those strategies and accommodations to the point to where there is no longer an educational need for those services. So we do have that. Yes,
Because I noticed in your numbers that in the elementary we have higher numbers, but in the secondary we have lower numbers. So my hope is that we're actually exiting out
Yes, we do.
some kids. That's good to know. And I've seen that happen. It's just a lot of parents see it as a life sentence, and when we first approach them to possibly put their child in and to see if they qualify for special ed, they don't see us as a support service. They see us as a life sentence.
Yes, and we do have those crucial conversations with those who are hesitant to have their kids get the services, and especially if we know for sure they need them. So we sit down and have those crucial conversations that it's really not a life sentence. And if you look at the acronym of the ARD, it's admission, review, and dismissal. So yes, they can always be able to exit from the program.
That's a good reminder. So I'm glad to have Ms. Johnson here because dyslexia has been in the news. Dyslexia has been around because I know when I was principal in 2001, we had dyslexia teachers, but it's always been that sort of hidden service. The state didn't pay us for it, still wanted us to serve, but they've not really paid us for it. I don't know if we've started getting, there's some talk about possibly getting some weighted average. Most parents don't know that most kids in special services get a certain amount of extra money attached to their attendance money. And so the more severe kids will get more money. Not much. I don't want to share that we get tons of money for special ed, but we get a little bit extra when a child is learning disabled versus ED versus a severely functioning child. Dyslexia up to this point has never received, a school has not received any money for dyslexic kids, even though we're mandated to serve them. Can you talk a little bit about some of the changes that have been coming and how dyslexia is finally coming into its own?
Well, one of the beautiful things that has happened within the last year is the state of Texas has required schools to screen students, our scholars, at the kindergarten and first grade level.
Well, yeah, because it used to be that you couldn't be dyslexic before second grade or something, right?
Exactly. And what's so important and what I'm passionate and excited about, Dr. Good, is that if we catch those scholars at a younger age, then we're able to give them the tools needed to be successful in the academic environment. If we catch them later, we can still give them the tools, but by then, they've got the stigmatism of, their peers and just other things come into play. So that's one thing that's a plus that we can screen, or that we're actually mandated to screen at an earlier age.
That's good to
Now, once screened and once identified, we at Legacy, we have an awesome program in place whereby once they're identified, they're brought to me to benchmark. And what I do is I just go through a general benchmark to determine if there's some holes, some gaps in which I can give an individualized plan to, as Dr. Mann alluded to. That's very important in our dyslexia program. Now, we use the Orton-Gillingham approach. It's an approach. It's not a method. It's not a program. It's not a technique. It's not a system. It's an approach, okay? And with this approach, there are some key factors that we make sure are in place. One of which being the Orton-Gillingham is a research-based approach. As a matter of fact, almost 100 years of research has been done to prove that this is a very effective approach for those students with dyslexia. Now, what are some of the other factors? Multisensory. Okay, multisensory. That is one of the key factors in this approach, and one of the key factors that's necessary for our students, our scholars with dyslexia. The true research-based proven methodologies say that the dyslexia services that we provide needs to have that multisensory approach. So when a student is identified and when I've benchmarked them, one of the first things we do, which as a matter of fact, I did it right before I came to the podcast today, is I help them identify what modality of learning is that they can own. What modality is their strength in learning? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we have what we call the VAC triangle. And what that is, the V represents visual, the A represents auditory, and the K represents kinesthetic or tactile. Now, these are three modalities of learning that we all have, but one or two of them we can learn better if we know what that is. For example, I let my students know that Miss Johnson is a visual learner. I've got to see it to learn it. You can talk to me all day long. You can give me activities, but if I don't see it, I might not get it. So I help those particular students that I work with today that actually they're new to our dyslexia program there on the Plano campus. I help them, we first do what we call just an assessment. It's just a real quick assessment to help them identify what is your learning modality. After answering the questions, after the assessment, they can then own whatever that modality was. And just so happens, these three students were all auditory, which was great because...
What are the odds, right?
Exactly. Now, one of them tied auditory and visual. So I told him, I said, listen, that means when you are in any class, when you graduate from Legacy, go to college, you need to help those that are like your professors, the facilitators, wherever you go, whatever learning environment you're in, make sure that teacher, that facilitator knows that you're an auditory learner. Because once they know how well what best way you learn, then they can best teach you. Okay? So they can now take ownership of their modality. And that's what I make sure all of my dyslexic students can own up to. Now, once they take ownership of that multisensory or that modality of learning, the Orton-Gillingham approach also must be structural, it must be sequential, it must be cumulative, cognitive, and flexible. I was so glad to hear Dr. Mann touch on that. flexibility, because that's what we offer at Legacy, that flexibility.
So how long can a student expect to be in dyslexic services once they're identified?
The program that we have, the services that we provide, it depends, of course, on the student, and that's where that flexibility comes in. But on an average, 2 to 3 years. And not bad. And you asked earlier if they could, work out of the program. And yes, they can benchmark out of dyslexia services. However, dyslexia is something that you'll always have, okay? But it's not a bad thing. We've got people like the Kennedys, Gates, Jobs. We've got successful people in our community that are dyslexic, are dyslexic, but have been very successful. So once you have grasped the tools, once you have managed to learn and use the tools that we provide and we teach in our dyslexic therapy services, you can move on to be very successful in life.
Right. Well, that's why we're here. So, and you're right. I was thinking of the Fonz. What's his name?
Henry Winkler?
Henry Winkler. I saw him at a conference, and he's severely dyslexic. And he's an actor and has to memorize lines. And
Tom Cruise is another one. Yeah.
So,
and just to mention one thing is that with the changes that are now coming with the dyslexia and related disorders, now dyslexia is being considered special education. In one case, it's actually specific learning disability. So which means if there is a student who qualify for dyslexia and there is a need for specialized instruction, they can now be served at the IDEA, which means that we can be able to now use the IDEA funds to serve that particular student. So that's one of the major changes that is happening. And it's I think when it comes to those students, especially if they need that specialized curriculum, it's very, very important.
So am I remembering correctly that dyslexia used to be under 504?
Yes.
Okay, but now really 504 is almost going under special services now, right? And so finally getting the attention. So before we go to the last part, which is asking me questions, let's talk a little bit about the teacher training that we do, because we're asking our teachers, because we have such high inclusion at our district, we're asking our teachers to take 20, 25 kids, whatever they have in their classroom, and teach them to their level. How are we training teachers to do that?
So number one, and I'll also have Dr. Mann address some of the areas that she has been training, is at the beginning of the school year, we do provide training, and this is on individual basis. So what happens is that Dr. Mann will make appointments with the teachers, and the most important thing is to talk about the implementation of the IEPs and alluding more to the accommodation and the need to make sure that they are following the IEPs to the T, because that's where it falls apart. So we have those individualized needs that it's not an option. If they are in the IEP, they have to be provided. So we do make those appointments with the teachers, and especially our new teachers. We do have teachers coming from Spain that this is a new concept to them. So what we do is to make sure that we sit down with them and provide that training. The other thing is before the beginning of the school year, we schedule professional modules in the calendar where we address the needs of the teachers. So what happens is that we don't provide the global training. We talk to the teachers and find out what areas do you want the special education department to address, especially in order to be able to provide the students with services. So we kind of, as much as we do have that schedule before the beginning of the school year, we tweak it based on the needs. The other thing is also we do have training also through Region 10, whereby we can either bring them in for training, and we also have those compliance training that happens during the summer that address some of those areas. So that's how we address the training And then Dr. Mann will talk about over the school year the kind of training that we are providing for the teachers. Like, for example, I know you did provide that training on discipline and accommodations.
Well, in addition to what Dr. Kahama has mentioned, I just want to put a plug in for the fact that in addition to any training that may come directly from the special education department, Legacy has, and thanks to Dr. Good, we have met the need as far as realizing that in a classroom, there are students in a classroom who are not receiving services under the umbrella of special education that are just as needy and may need that instruction simplified. So right now we have our coaches that you've brought in as far as math and reading, and just going the extra mile to teach all teachers differentiation. Making sure that first and foremost, especially if our students are in the inclusion classroom, it's not a homogeneous class anymore. So that is first and foremost. In addition to that, we want to make sure, my job is to make sure that I know that teachers sometimes it can become belaboring, but to realize that and understand that implementing the IEP with consistency and with fidelity, that's the most important thing, because sometimes we do tire. And it's just life, not intentionally, but making sure that if a student is not being successful, I come in to say, okay, let's look, let's see, have we done A, B, C, and D? Is it documented that we've done A, B, C, and D? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's where, with any kind of strategy that you put in, documenting the implementation. So my role is just more so as the documenting and making sure it's happening with fidelity. And then also just making sure that the teacher do not suffer in silence. Dr. Kahama said that based on individual, we want our teachers to be flexible with our students as far as meeting their needs, but we also, as great as a department that special education is at Legacy, as great as we are, we're not mind readers. And we respond to the need. Mm-hmm. So if there's a need, we don't want our teachers to suffer in silence, and we try to get that message over. Please pull on us as your resource, and we will bring in whatever it takes, like Dr. Kahama said, from Region 10, if we don't have those skills, to make sure that it's successful, because at the end of the day, it's about meeting the needs of our students.
And the walkthrough, Dr. Good, also come in very handy, because those walkthrough, we are able to identify where the needs are and where training needs to be provided.
So we've talked about a lot of the neat things that are going on at Legacy. How do we know they're working, Dr. Kahama?
Yes, that's my best part. So there are a few things that have happened, and some actually are things that we have learned through mistakes. In the year 2015-2016, our special education was actually staged, and when I mean was staged is TEA uses what it calls performance-based monitoring system. So it's more of a data system where they report on the performance of public school district as well as public charter schools on the performance of some of the selected programs. So one of the selected programs is special education program. And what happened is they have a scale of 0 to 4. So you always want to be at 0, which in a lot of cases you're like, who wants to be at 0? But that's where you want to be. Now, if you're stage 1, you meet requirements. Stage 2, 3, and 4, you don't want to be there. Unfortunately, we were staged 3. Which means that we had to engage in an improvement process to make sure that we are addressing those low-performing areas in special education. So we sat down as a school, and we had to come up with a special ed action plan that actually we even had to submit to Texas Education Agency. So we focused on data-based decisions. So one of the first things we did is we had our special education teachers review student grades on weekly basis. That is not something easy to ask a teacher to do. So they had to go to the gen ed teachers and find out how are our special education students performing. So they are actually assessing their progress on academic tasks. If any of the students was failing, they had to come up with action plan to address those failures. So that was number one. Then they also had to get involved in the data dig sessions, whereby they had to analyze data. We look at district as well as state assessment results to find out where our students are. And then what we expected to happen is they are going to tailor their instruction to address the needs of the students, those low performing areas. Then Dr. Mann, who our special education coordinator, had to, and this was not easy to ask her to do, weekly meetings every Friday with our special education teachers so that she can find out where our students monitor and increase our students' time, both on instructional programs. So we are talking on Imagine Math, iStation, Achieve 3000. So we had to make sure that we increase the student time on those instructional softwares. And then with those weekly meetings, if there was any student failing at the end of 6 weeks, which the first thing first, the reason why we had them monitor weekly, because we didn't want to get at the 6 weeks mark and find our students are failing. Now, you can do everything well and something can happen. So if there was any students who had failed within the 6 weeks during our progress monitoring all our report cards, they had to call a failure ARD. And in that ARD, they had to come up with an action plan. What are we going to do as a team to make sure that this student is making progress? Then we have our tutors. Our math tutors, they are excellent. And we have a math tutor on every campus. So this one, they will provide direct instruction on targeted skills where the students are not meeting TICS objectives to make sure that they are at par or they master those TICS. So this is what we put together in order to be able to get out of stage 3. Did we or did we not?
What happened, Dr.
Yes.
Kahama?
Now, we were hoping that we're going to get from stage 3 to 2, but guess what happened, Dr. Good? We moved to stage 1,
Yay.
which means that we met requirement. Now, the good part is we have to brag on what good things that have been happening because we have maintained stage 1 for the last 3 years.
All right.
So, and that's really important.
Yes,
it
it
speaks well of the work. It speaks well of what you're doing, what teachers are doing, and how kids are learning. So, we've come to the end of our podcast. As I've mentioned to anybody who's willing to come and sit on Tuesdays with me, that our 30 minutes is really 5 minutes or feels like 5 minutes. And so I think instead of going on and asking questions, I think we're going to end with this good information that we have had your good work end up having us meet requirements for our special ed students. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here and taking the time, and keep up the good work. Our kids need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Dr. Be Good show. For more information on Legacy Preparatory Charter Schools, visit our website, legacypca.com, or call 469-249-1099. And remember to like us on Facebook, where we stream live weekly Tuesdays at 3 p.m.